Hello and welcome to the all-new call-in show, Belief Battles, a weekly show ready to take your calls about religion, atheism, and secularism, featuring co-hosts, atheist and international VTuber Teo Elateo, and Mark Peralta, an ex-evangelical pastor, now atheist. So without further ado, Belief Battles.
Call 1-866-696-6698.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Belief Battles. I'm Mark Peralta.
And I'm Apostate Anonymous, joining for the first time. I know I'm new to the call, but I asked Mark to let me join today because I started a new TikTok account and had started putting out some content and got some engagement from people. And so I wanted to continue the format in person. One of the commenters had mentioned that she wished that she could talk to me live and have a good conversation. So that's exactly what this format is for.
That's right. And welcome, Apostate Ann, to Belief Battles.
Thank you.
Very, very glad to have you here. And I think there are a lot more reasons why you're here in addition to what you just said. It looks like people are seeing more in you, and they're excited. So I want to congratulate you on your recent success in Facebook and all the other social media, TikTok stuff that you're doing. So if you don't already follow Apostate Ann, please do. Right? Is that in TikTok? Is that also Apostate
Ann? Yeah. So I think Apostate Ann 1.
Apostate Ann 1. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I love these conversations and especially this format where you can really see the person's face, potentially hear where they're coming from, ask any questions, and have it be a respectful dialogue, little back and forth.
For sure, yeah. So maybe that's a good opportunity to kind of talk about and tell our listeners why we do this, what's this whole Belief Battles all about. And I'll just briefly summarize. What we've put together here is, and this is a large group of people that are coming together, and I want to go ahead and thank you ahead of time. Those of you that are out there behind scene, helping us screening calls and bringing people to talk to us, because what we're looking for is that you put our unbelief to the test. If you're a theist, if you are a Christ believer, a Jew, Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, a religion of any kind where you have a belief system, we used to believe. We were Christians for several decades, and I myself personally was a pastor as well, and I served in the church for a long time. So did Apostate Ann, and we're now after a period of deconstruction, a period of putting our own belief system to the test. You know, we came to a moment in our lives. I came to a moment in my life where I'm like, okay, why do I believe what I believe? Like, I know that I was raised in this, and it seems like it just makes so much sense. But why do I believe that this book right here was actually inspired by a divinity out there that knows better, and not just human beings?
Yeah, and to that point, my journey kind of started with saying, okay, forget about what's good or bad, because I think that's what a lot of religious have views on. This is good, this is bad. I'm like, okay, how about let's just start with what is true? Let's just start there and then build upon that. And then also to your point, I was going to say too, if anyone wants to call in with questions about the deconversion process or deconstruction process, like, for example, raising your kids, how did it affect your marriage and things like that? Because it can be scary leaving the faith. It can be scary challenging the status quo and what you've always known. And so you may want to ask questions about that too.
Yeah, perhaps like you are currently at maybe a journey that we were in a couple of years ago where we were sort of like dabbling into skepticism and like we're beginning just to question, but we don't feel like we're prepared enough to like maybe dive deep into some of these questions and perhaps feel a bit insecure about your doubts and whether or not you are justified. Maybe we can help you we can walk you through what you're experiencing, what doubts you have. So we're not necessarily just looking for believers that are like in the faith. If you're a missionary, if you're an apologist, if you're someone that just feels like the Holy Spirit is flowing through you and speaking through you, that maybe you have something that you can say to convince us, especially if you've got actual evidence that there is a God. We'd love to hear it. And that's why we created this belief battle, so that there can be somewhat, I'm not going to say neutral, because, you know, we are atheists, but a welcoming environment where you can feel safe, even in anonymity, right? You don't have to tell us where you're calling from, although we'd love to hear about that. You don't even have to give us your real name. Or if you want to just come out and say what you need to say, even on camera, you can actually. There should be, if we haven't already done so, there should be in the comments, we should have pinned a link that you can click on through your computer and log in on through StreamYard. Or you can always call us using our phone number, which is toll-free in the United States. And that is 1-866-696-6698. And hey, give us a call. We'll our screener will welcome you in, and be prepared to pre-share what you like to talk about, what you believe is, and then we'll go from there. So,
and what makes this program just so fun and interesting is because I feel like in real life, you're not supposed to discuss religion with other people, right? That's one of the taboos. Don't discuss politics or religion. And if you discuss religion with the wrong person, it can have major repercussions in your life. Like maybe if it's an employer, you know, now you have awkward moments working together. Maybe now they're judging you. And so this format, no judgment. This is why we're here, is to have these religious debates. And so, yeah, you can hear both sides of the coin, because I think you can't get a full perspective unless you really look at other people's perspectives too and hear all the information and then decide for yourself.
Absolutely. And when you do call, we would appreciate if you call us with honesty. And I think with that, what I mean is, if you really are a believer, then say so. If you're not, then just be honest with us. And we're not really welcoming trolls or anything like that. But hey, you know, we are Belief Battles, and we are standing by for your calls. And I know there's a couple of people that we are expecting to give us a call. You want to tell us a little bit about a friend of yours that may be calling today? We hope that if you're watching, we're waiting.
Well, yeah, there's a few people actually that responded to a TikTok that I had put out there. And one of them is a flat earther. So probably more on the extreme side, you know, believes the moon landings are fake and the whole 9 yards. And so I invited him to come. So that's one of the people. And then the other one, you know, we were having a really great back and forth. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I was just challenging her to say, well, how do you know the Bible's true? And that was a question left unanswered. And that's kind of a question that may take time. So that's why I also invited her to come on.
Yeah. How do you know that the Bible is true?
How do you know the Bible's true?
Yeah.
Because one thing she did mention was that she has read all these scholars. I think she mentioned Martin Luther and just some of the leaders throughout religious history. Mm-hmm. And I told her, but all of those writers are assuming the Bible is true. Mm-hmm. So that's why we've got to look outside the Bible at extra biblical sources, see if historical records corroborate the claims in the Bible. You know, if the Bible is true, and I think this is true for anything that's true, there's usually many ways of knowing that to be true. Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't just be limited to a book that
Right.
we get this information. It should be demonstrable in other ways.
Yeah. Now, certainly, when it comes to say facts in the Bible, I think that not all of them are worth the same weight in terms of evidence, right? Like if you're going to tell us that evidence for the Bible being true is because there is a Jerusalem and there
Or
is
that
a
you
Nazareth.
feel it.
Those are things that are not a big deal. I think what we're looking for is more of the evidence that can prove that the resurrection, um, the ascension of Jesus. The claims that the Bible makes, like God created the universe,
Mhm.
like a God is watching right now, like there's an afterlife, right? Those claims is what we need evidence for, because that's what really matters. The other stuff is just part of maybe the tradition. Much of it might be true, although I will say, and we've done several episodes in our podcast, Apostate of Mind, where we've brought up examples of even historical things that just are inaccurate.
Mhm.
And so those are the kind of things that we're really interested in. So I think this would be, as we're waiting for a phone call to come in, we can maybe talk about, since we opened up that we're atheists, what is it? What is atheism really? Because I feel like out there, when I hear Christians talk about atheists, or I hear Muslims, or any religious, usually as a Christian, what would be sort of like speaking against atheism for something, and they have their own way of defining it. But what is atheism?
Well, actually, I heard something today that it was from a believer, and they were like being sarcastic and saying, "Oh, okay, you've convinced me. I'll believe what you believe. Oh, oops, that's nothing." So I think that's a wrong assumption that atheists believe in nothing, or that atheists are asserting that there is no God. I think those are some of the misconceptions. As far as what it is I would say looking for evidence of God and not finding it. Or maybe
So, yeah.
maybe yeah, that's my very simplified definition. How would you describe it?
And that sounds like the process. That's part of that process. In a nutshell, though, atheism is simply the rejection of the God claim, any claim, whatever tradition that might be.
Due
The
to a
rejection
lack of evidence.
due to a lack of evidence, which is where the problem resides.
And that reminds me of a quote I heard that was saying, I used to believe that there was the seen and then the unseen realm. And now he realizes that there's either knowing or not knowing. And if you can't see it and observe it, then you can't possibly know it. And so I think that's part of what's behind evidence, needing evidence to support any belief that you have, but in particular, as it relates to atheism, for God.
That's a great observation. There's actually a diagram that I've been showing in the other channels that I think this is a good opportunity to feature it, and maybe we can talk about it, because it does show you what it is really to know something. This is essentially what we're going to talk about here. This comes from a theory of knowledge. This is knowledge is in its okay, and we're going to learn. But what you're looking at here is it's a Venn diagram where you've got concentric circles, where you've got some areas of overlap, and we're overlapping three the three main things that consist knowledge. One is, maybe the most common, is justification. There needs to be reasons and evidence for whatever it is that you believe in. Second to that is there needs to be a belief that it is true. In other words, if you don't believe in whatever it is that you're talking about, then you don't really know it yet. And then the third part of that is it true? Because if it's not true, then you can't really know it as true. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now this will become more clear as we talk about the overlaps. So because there are different scenarios with every belief in life, right? There are these three things. So you could be justified in your reasoning for claiming that something is true and therefore claiming to know it. You can believe that that is true, but what if it's not true? Like you're claiming that there are still dinosaurs in Earth roaming around somewhere, right? You can believe that to be true. You can have perhaps what you consider justifiable reasons for believing that to be true. It may not be enough. You may be mistaking in the reasons that you have, but you could say that. But then the fact that it's actually not true cancels out the whole knowledge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and which means that you are possibly mistaken, right? When you have reasons to believe, but it's actually not true. You could also have it where it's actually true, okay, and you also believe something to be true, but you don't have enough reasons for it. You're not justified in believing it to be true, and therefore you've made a lucky guess. Okay, you've poorly justified a true belief. And then finally, you could also have it where you believe it to be true. It's actually true. Okay, there are enough reasons for it to be true, but you don't believe it to be true. And when you don't believe something to be true, but it indeed is true, and there are enough reasons to justify it to be true, then you're simply in denial. And I think that's where you have people that are denying the sphere, Earth as a globe. They believe that the Earth is flat. They have a whole bunch of reasons why they think that it's flat, but because it isn't true, then they're just sadly mistaken.
Well, and then in the situation of flat earthers where they do have so much evidence, it's really denial as well. And that's why it's so important to constantly question your beliefs. Like, why do I think that's true? Do I have enough evidence to believe that? And the evidence that you do have, is it fallacious? Like, for example, I hear a lot of people saying, by the way, do we have a caller? Is that somebody?
No, that's just a screener.
For example, someone may say, well, I believe the Bible's true because there are millions of people who follow it and believe it's true. Mm-hmm. If that's your justification, then you have to think to yourself, well, just because everybody believes it to be true, does that mean that it's true? No, that's not really a good reason. Yeah. So then you have to question that belief further to find a reasonable reason.
That's right. And that's actually a fallacy. It's a fallacy of ad populum, which means that you can't just assume something to be true or conclude something to be true because the majority of people believe it to be true. You can extrapolate that in other areas and find out how that's inconsistent. For example, there was a time where the majority of people believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, right? Mm-hmm. But as it turns out, we know that it's not. So just because the majority of people believe that to be true doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So that would be having wrong justification, mm-hmm. or false justification. So right. This model presupposes that your justification and the reasoning is actually sound. And that's where we find ourselves. Is like, you know what? When it comes to the evidence for the existence of God, when it comes to the evidence of the Bible being the word of such said God, it was an inspiration, so forth and so on, we don't feel like the reasons that we used to have and the reasons that most people have, or the reasons that are available, are just not enough.
And notice how on this chart, nowhere does it say how you feel about it. I feel like when it comes to religious beliefs, a lot of feelings get in the mix, and that's, you have to put that aside, because you have to realize feelings don't determine truth. Truth will stand on its own regardless of reason. So that's why talking about religion can also be very inflammatory, is because people are so emotional about it. But when you really question it from an unbiased perspective, put the emotions aside, that's where you can truly sort through the logic behind why you believe what you believe.
Precisely. And so with that, we can summarize this by simply reading, the summary there. It says, we have knowledge when something is true, when we believe it to be true, and we have good reasons for believing that it's true. So that's when you can actually know something.
So it's not enough to just believe it. That doesn't make it true. So when people say, well, that's my truth and that's your truth. Well, there's not your truth and my truth. There's your belief and my belief. But there should be one truth. If it is true, it should be not changing based on the person's perception or belief of it.
Right. And that's not good enough just to be like, oh, I just know that he's there. Or I just know it.
I feel it.
Yeah. So you're not really knowing something. You're likely mistaken. And so that's why we are atheists, because we've now come to the realization that the reasons that we had for justifying our belief in a God are simply not enough, not sound. There are many issues with most arguments out there, and we can get into that later, but that's why we are atheists, which is a rejection of the claim that a God exists. That's it. It's not people that are like in rebellion against the sky daddy. It's not,
or wanting to sin.
Yeah, that's right. It's not that we just want to sin. If anything, not having this fear of a heaven or a hell, not having a fear of being called into the presence of the holy judge in the end of our lives, which I think fueled the majority of our motivation for doing good things out there. Because, come on, let's face it, right? We are all accumulating goodies.
Yeah, we want to be good people. We want to be good in the eyes of God, assuming he exists.
That's right, because God is like social media, right? It's like every time you do something, you get a like, and you see that like, and that heart pops in your notification, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing good, right? So we want a God to reward us. So we do good things, generally. But I would argue that those are not good reasons for doing good things. And having bad reasons for doing good things trump the whole thing. I think it takes away from the essence of the goodness that you're bringing. Is if you've got an agenda, and all it takes is just be honest with you. You're taking care of somebody, you're lending a hand, you're helping out your neighbor. But if you're like I used to be, gung-ho for the gospel, somewhere in the back of my head is like, I know someday I'm going to preach him the gospel. I know someday we're going to have that Jesus talk. And if that's you, that's already screwing the whole thing up, because you've got something else in mind. You're not truly rising to the occasion. You're not truly just being selfless. There's something out there.
And I think there's something also when you're taking prayer off the table, like you realize that's not doing as much, as that's not doing anything like really empowering yourself and challenging yourself to take action and really help somebody, and you realize that that's doing more for the person than prayer. The other thing that comes to mind too is I hear a lot of people saying that they believe in God because they experience God in their mind. Okay.
Mhm.
And the mind's really powerful. Like, we can't think that we're above our own mind. Like, I remember when I was a believer, I thought I spoke in tongues, but you realize your brain
Yeah.
can do that. Shakalakatan, santilas. However, it doesn't have to be coming from God, just like a vision doesn't have to come from God. I mean, what's the difference between having a vision and having an imagination? Like, it's not any different. And so what I challenge anyone who their only evidence is something that is within their mind, to look outside of their mind, or to maybe take that evidence as a grain of salt, because really it doesn't carry much weight. If it only exists in your mind, then it makes it indistinguishable from something imaginary.
Mhm.
I'll say that again. If it only exists in your mind, then how do you distinguish it from the imaginary?
Yeah.
You really can't. You can say you have a feeling, but at the end of the day, we can impose that feeling on ourselves. That's why it's the placebo effect.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a real thing that people feel better because they believe they're taking this medication.
Mhm.
Oh, well, let me back up and explain placebo effect for those who
Yeah.
may not know. So in medical studies, they'll always give a patient the medication, the active ingredient, and what's seemingly the medication, but it's really placebo, which could be a sugar pill, it could be saline, depending on if the medication is liquid or a pill. And so the patient's ingesting it and they may start feeling better. And almost every single study you see, there is some benefit from taking a placebo pill, because of the mental effect. Now, the medication always, typically in the studies, there's more beneficial than the placebo. And that's how they really distinguish between your mental influence and the actual influence of the medication. So just to say, our minds are so powerful. So we've got to look outside of our mind to find evidence to justify your belief.
That's great insight. I do want to ask you though, like, what more can you tell us about, like, what's the mechanism at play with placebo effect? Because it's not just like imagination. It's not just like what is actually what may be happening in the brain that leads to some benefit.
I think psychologically, if you think you're finally getting help, you're finally getting treated, I think I don't know, it depends the situation, what the medication's for, what the disease state is. There's many different factors at play. But if you have the feeling like you're taking something that's helping you, you may stimulate different chemical reactions that could have a beneficial effect.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. It kind of makes me think about, like, whenever you do something good, do you ever get like a fuzzy feeling?
Hi, yes.
A bit of a, oh crap. Like, it's just and it's not a thought, it is actually a feeling of something. Is that just happening on its own, or is there chemistry involved in this?
Definitely. You're probably high on your serotonin and dopamine and feeling really good. And for example, like, your stomach is a second brain. So you're also releasing dopamine and serotonin. So maybe if you have stomach issues, maybe those get relief. So there's many effects. That's why they say, exercise and get good sleep and all those things, because that helps with your body's chemistry. Eat healthy. All of that is related to your body's chemistry, which helps you feel better. But it's when it's your mind, it's limited, right? You can't cure all diseases by positive thinking, and prayer. So prayer is also one of those things that may help you feel better. But large studies show, like, if you're praying for somebody else, for example, it didn't have that beneficial effect. So your thoughts in your mind may help you feel better, but overall prayer wasn't proven to be effective in scientific studies.
I agree, and I think that has to do with how it's just simply happening within your own body. the effects of whatever you're doing are translating into chemistry that is acting in your body that does not go beyond your body. And I think much of that has to do, in my opinion, with dopamine. And dopamine is a hormone, right? It's a brain neuron or neurotransmitter that is involved in the body's reward system, that feel-good sensation, and many other things. But it's involved there. And I think that it's possible that part of the evolution of mammals, for a long time in the evolution, there is something about like, hey, if this happens, then this is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
You can see that with pack animals, for example, dogs. The reason why dogs are so great at being domesticated and being part of the family and all that stuff is because part of their evolution is that species found it to be useful to stick to each other, to stick with each other.
Of course, the adrenaline, the fight or flight, that's all very primitive from way deep in our evolutionary history.
That's right. And then, animals like dogs, they will get close to each other. And they get close to you because they feel when you pet them, when you're petting an animal, what do you think is happening in the chemistry of the brain? Mm-hmm. They feel great because if you're a pet owner,
yeah,
right? They're addicted to your petting. Our dog is addicted to our petting, and that's not because he has some rational thought, but because there is a reward system that they feel good because their brain is releasing chemistry that makes them feel good. So I think that when people take the placebo, when people go to the church service, when people attend the volunteering event, when people go out
singing,
on mission,
praising, worshiping,
when they are putting in their time and doing the right thing, there is a reward system involved in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say that we all have the propensity of becoming addicted to being churchgoers. Don't you think?
Or at least having that sense of community, that connection with people, that view that they see you as somebody good and trustworthy, that you're helping out people, that you're making a difference in your life. Those are all good and beautiful things that it can exist exclusive from religion and God. That is part of who you are as people, as community. We're empathetic as a species, so we do have feeling and compassion and care for others. That doesn't come exclusive from God, although that's what religion likes to teach, is that you couldn't possibly be a moral person if you weren't taught about the 10 Commandments or God's law, and that's not true. That's not the case.
Absolutely.
And another point I hear a lot is, I know God exists because evil exists. Okay. I want to talk about that because there's a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
Where would you go with that? With somebody saying that?
That God exists because evil exists.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how you can go several ways with that. One way would be if the person already believes in a Satan or a devil out there that's doing bad things, or is the source of evil in the world, then it'd be pretty weird to think that perhaps there isn't like an opposite force.
Right, like kind of dualism, like how can you have light and not have darkness, and something like that.
Yeah. Sort of like how is there dryness without wetness?
Maybe.
Yeah. Right. I mean, right? How do you know if you're dry if you're never been wet? Or
I don't know.
But it just doesn't work. I mean, that's just philosophical thinking. first of all, dualism in life, it's yet to be proven. It sounds very convincing, and there's a history of philosophers that have made their arguments for that, but it's yet to be proven. What do I mean by that? Well, in the religious context, having equal opposite forces rule the universe. Like you've got a good God and you've got an evil God, and they are balancing each other out, like yin yang of deities.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's one versus one other, or is a group of evil ones against a group of good ones, it still is sort of a balance thing.
And I think I would ask too, what is your picture of what evil existing looks like? Because maybe they're thinking about somebody who's a murderer, a psychopath, a pedophile, and that's evil, and that's why they do these things, is because they're evil. But with the advancement in psychology, psychiatry, brain scans, we're really advancing in our understanding of what's really going on with people who are psychopaths and murderers and pedophiles and all the things I mentioned. Like it's literally, you can see in their brain where there's certain parts of their brain that are underactive or overactive. Like maybe their impulse control is underactive. And so maybe everybody has, a crazy thought every once in a while, but they lack the ability to process it and filter it out and say, hey, that's not a good idea. Don't act upon that. So just things like that there's another better explanation that's demonstrable and measurable and observable. That's a more logical explanation than you've got an evil spirit demon in you causing you to do those things. The other thing that I hear about being what evil existing looks like could be like the occult and the Freemasons and Satanists and Hollywood, and but if you dig deeper, like there's a lot there. At the end of the day, I would personally argue, and please call in if you disagree, but I would argue that evil is like a construct. Like at the end of the day, it's everybody makes choices, and those choices impact people positively or negatively. And so I disagree with it being labeled as evil existing. Nor
like it's a thing on its own,
right?
Rather
or
than
like
just
a
the
spirit,
act. That's a very bad act, which no one's denying. Right. Like if someone goes out and shoots a bunch of people, right? That is an evil thing. But just because that thing is evil and that thing happened,
or an evil act,
does not necessarily prove that there's an evil entity behind that. Right. Yeah. That needs to be demonstrated. Another area that I think that people can go with that existence of evil being evidence for the existence of God is maybe a place where they're thinking, well, if there's no one out there to rectify these evils, right? Then what sort of life is that? That seems very unfair, right? I think that's where some of them are coming from as well. And
it's an interesting. I wouldn't expect that to be a reason why you believe in God, because I would think, if anything, that would disprove the existence of God. Because you could also say, well, isn't the existence of evil, like, how could you also believe in a benevolent, all-powerful, all-knowing God with evil? Because, if you were to ask anybody, hey, if you were God for a day, what would you do? I mean, first on the list would be eliminate evil, right? Feed the starving children, cure diseases, and, things like that. And so the existence of evil being evidence for God, it doesn't quite make sense logically.
It's, if anything, it's like you're saying, it's more of the opposite. It's more of an argument against the existence of God. Well, which God though? The biblical God, right? The omnibenevolent God, the omnipresent, omnipotent, right? Like if he could come up with some sort of, I don't know, nutritious crop that could grow in the desert and feed people and solve at least hunger, like I think the world has much bigger issues that could take, that need some attention. Why not just like, hey, let's at least not deal with this one? Can you imagine the
Right.
amount of evil that would be prevented if people weren't forced to go through extreme measures? And I'm not justifying anything at all, but people do. People will
Hmm.
say, "Well, I've got to feed my family, so I'm gonna have to take, and I'm gonna have to steal. I'm gonna have to, I don't know, whatever."
Hmm.
So, I mean, that you think that'd be an easy fix if you're a god?
And if I'm wanting to be super controversial,
All right, let's hear it.
one could even argue that religion could promote evil acts. I think many times, for example, in terrorists, I know this is an extreme example, but those are religious people. They're people who are following their book to the letter of the law, and God says these people are righteous and these people are not, and they think they're doing God's work, and that justifies them doing things that are not humane.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's really crazy. All right, we've noticed some more people tuning in. So if
Yeah.
you are new to Belief Battles, if this is your first time tuning in, we want to welcome you. I'm Mark Peralta, and with me is the lovely apostate Anne, and we are here taking time away from family responsibility, kids, all that good stuff, pleasures included, and to be here so that we can give you an opportunity to question our unbelief. We are atheists, former Christians, well over 20 plus years serving, going to church, living Christian life, hosting Christian families.
We literally hosted families in our home. I was thinking about this almost every single weekend for over a year.
Yep. Yep.
Led the worship team, taught the Sunday school.
That's right. You're
Did the
part
mission
of the worship
trips.
singer.
Yeah, we
here.
were all in.
That's right. Apostate Anne has a beautiful voice, by the way,
thank
and
you.
yeah, she worshipped the Lord for years. And but yeah, let's just be honest, folks. There's just not enough evidence out there. But I don't know. Maybe we're just ignorant about that. So why don't you give us a
We're
call?
open. Let's
That's
have
right.
a good dialogue.
Yes. You need to dial the phone number. You could do that.
Oh, yeah. What's the number?
696 6698. I'm going to put that on the screen here for you to see. Let me remove the banner right there. Or on the chat, there's a link that's pinned to the chat at the very top where you can click on it using your computer or smartphone and log in through StreamYard, where you can even show your face and we'll bring you in and you'll be part of this live. Just know that this is a live show. So if you come up or say anything, we have no control of what goes out there, and you're
Oh,
being
geez.
recorded. So, but either way, we are here to take your calls. So if you're waiting, you're thinking, unless everyone that's out there watching right now is an atheist, what are you waiting for? We're ready to take your questions, your calls with your arguments.
And I see there's comments. Is there anything that we should be looking at over there?
Let's look at the chat. Let's see. That's a good idea. Let's see.
All right.
All right. Franco says hello. He's greeting us from, I'm assuming, from Nuestra Experiencia Atea, which is our Spanish version. It's translated the atheist experience. And Teo Ateo is the leader. He's the organizer. He's the man. He's the deity of that network where he hosts several channels, several segments
He's so
that
involved.
feature
Yes.
all kinds of good stuff,
Mhm.
ranging from everyday life things, secularism, the healthy secularism, healthy humanism. He talks about things related to people's rights. There's the several segments that he hosts, and we're very thankful to him. So
Someone had
Please say
asked for the
hello.
link to call. I hope they were able to find it.
okay.
The other thing I was going to share while you're looking through the comments is that Mark and I attended a conference with Seth Andrews, and he gave a presentation called God Likes to Watch: The Shaming and Blaming of Purity Culture. So purity culture refers to sort of the religious, the harm that, well, I guess, okay, the culture behind waiting till marriage, the culture behind being modest. And so part of the religious traditions that come out of that is, for example, the promise rings, the promise keepers, promising to wait till marriage, save your virginity. So really emphasizing your value tied to your modesty, your virginity, your sexuality. So it was so enlightening to really break down the effects that purity culture can have, the negative effects, and how it was impacting, like, for example, somebody getting into a marriage that they regret instantly because they're not compatible sexually, or maybe they don't know what they're doing because they don't have any experiences. And what are some of the other negatives that came out that he mentioned of purity culture?
Mm-hmm. I remember the just the overall tradition of like the fundamentalists in with regards to like how they criticize women's clothing and how what they're supposed to wear and what they're not supposed to wear, and how like it's the same old ridiculous argument, like if you're dressing too provocative, that you're asking for it.
Yes, blaming
Like,
the history of blaming the woman for tempting the man, as if, and it could go both ways. I mean, the whole point is blaming somebody else for the thoughts that you have, when we all know we can control our own actions. So it's not being blamed on the temptress if you have a bad thought or carry out a bad action.
yeah. Alrighty, well, folks, let's see. It's been about 48 minutes into our live. We're still waiting for folks to dial in or log in through your computers. So, hate to sound like a broken record, but if you're hesitating on calling, please don't.
Oh, don't hesitate.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying if you want to call, don't call. Don't hesitate to call.
All
Gotcha.
right.
And I see a good comment made by Alma. Is that okay to share?
Yeah,
show
please.
that? All right. So I think she means, like, isn't it funny how God made laws about different threads of fabric, but was unable to say, do not have slaves? So even, yeah, he could have made those laws. And I'm sure it was pertaining to the conversation we were having at the moment. But the point still remains that it's like, supposedly God did draw a line in the sand. Don't wear this fabric. But then there's so many crazy things like slaves or rape, that's like he gives rules around it, or gives direction around it, obviously not forbidding it.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because that's so the Bible to do. Because one of the things that I've concluded from studying the Old Testament, primarily the first 5 books, where you get the law, and like the book of Leviticus, and like why, like what are the God's laws. And in my studies, I came to the conclusion that very much the law, the Mosaic law, or the laws that come through Moses, have everything to do with the land, and it's all about the land. And it's like the false the superstition that's behind the law is that sin is responsible for contaminating the ground. That sin is responsible for the rainy season not coming, for it not raining this year. That sin is responsible for ultimately the exile of the Jews away from their land. And like when you read the prophets, they're telling you like it's sort of like the land is vomiting the people out because of their sin. And so the reverse of that is if you obey the law, well then guess what? Right? The land will be fruitful. It'll be flowing with milk and honey, right? That's it's all about the land.
I kind of picture back in the day, like primitive times, farmers being like, no rain, drought. Okay, who sinned? Who did something bad? Like you just gotta find a reason why the gods wouldn't send you rain. And why would something bad happen? Oh, somebody must have displeased the gods. And that's still apparent in the thinking today. So Alma asked about posting the link. Is there one available?
Absolutely. We can do that in a minute. So I also want to talk about, so the law is responsible for the land being contaminated, which means that if you sin, then it's going to vomit you out. And so that's how they then justify the exiles. Okay. So when you think about that, if the law has everything to do with the land, and so then you start thinking, all right, let's talk about agriculture. Let's talk about farming, right? So does the law make any, does the Bible make any laws regarding agriculture and farming?
Is this a rhetorical question?
Yeah. So it does. How does it do that, former pastor? Well, how about making a distinction of what is a clean animal and what is an unclean animal? How about making the distinction of what is the animal that is acceptable as sacrifice? What are the animals that are allowed to be brought to the temple? Which, if you think about it, the temple for hundreds of years served as the butcher for people, because back in the day you didn't go to your supermarket and get your meats. And most people did not go through the trouble of like doing the whole sacrifice and cleaning of the animal and so forth and so on. And so the custom and the law was so that people would bring those animals to the temple, so that there they would be sacrificed and cleaned and made kosher and everything, so that you can eat it, right? So if the temple regulates the kinds of animals that are allowed to be brought in, then they're regulating the farming industry. You see. So we can go on and on. I just posted on the live chat a link if you wish to join us live through StreamYard, which you should be able to do through your computer. Even if you don't have a camera, you'll need at least a microphone. If not, use your smartphone. I've logged in on StreamYard through my iPhone.
Or you can call in at 866-696-6698.
Yep. We're going to be here for maybe another 10 minutes or so.
That sounds good.
So please don't wait until last minute.
Yeah, it's my first time here. I'd love to get to talk to somebody live.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, there's Ketamono. Ketamono has been a frequent guest, and we want to thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's something else I wanted to talk about. And so on our last episode, if we had, I think her name was Christine.
I
Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think her name was Christine. our caller last episode, we were talking about dreams, and we were talking about sleep disorders and sleep paralysis.
And from her perspective, she worked in the hospital, right, or ER, something in medical, and had a patient who was on her deathbed. And that night she went home and was awoken and saw the lady. And she's noted the time, and then was able to go back the next day and correlate the time, or say it was around the same time that she passed away was the time I woke up.
That's right. Yeah, she brought up that interesting example. So what I wanted to talk about was sleep paralysis. And I wanted to ask you, since you're here, to share with everyone perhaps what you remember or what you know about how sleep paralysis has affected me over the years, and the things that you have noticed. And could you describe what you've witnessed me with sleep paralysis?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's different for many people, and I don't know that we're 100% saying that what this lady experienced was sleep paralysis, but what we're saying
just what you've seen
for you.
Yeah.
What it usually looks like is, you're asleep, but you're also awake. So he's like trying to talk like, like he's trying to say, wake me up, but he can't move and he's asleep. So he's just like, and then that's how I know to wake him up, because now I know that's what's happening when he's doing that.
So that's what you see.
Yeah.
So what I'm actually experiencing is I'm in intense panic, and in my sleep, in whenever I'm in that state, because it's not like all of night, it'll be just a moment, but that moment just feels like an eternity. For some reason, during my sleep, all of a sudden, I have awareness of time, and some awareness, or at least the sensation of awareness of my surroundings, even though I'm asleep and my eyes are closed. And it's during those moments when I'd feel demonic presence, I would say. I felt like a demon was coming or was standing in the corner of the room. I sometimes felt like there was something above me on my chest. And as a Christian,
and that's when you were a believer.
Yeah, as a Christian, I'm spiritualizing the whole thing. I'm thinking, this is the Satan is here. I'm a seminary student, and Satan is against what I'm doing, and Satan is here messing with me. And because I am in a state of paralysis, which is why it's called sleep paralysis, which is perfectly normal, and I'll get into that in a moment, but I am unable to say anything or move my mouth at all. But I'm in my sleep, I'm yelling at you. I'm like, wake me up, because I know that if I wake up, then it's over. Which is interesting, because you'd think that if there were actual demons in the room, then whether I'm asleep or awake, they should still be there. Like, why is their influence only available while I'm in that weird state of my sleep? So I'm yelling for you to wake me up, but I'm unable to. And somehow I'm able to kind of shake my body into kind of waking myself up until I'm like at least mobile enough to so sleep paralysis is a real thing. A lot of people have sleep paralysis. I read statistics like 35% of people have some form of sleep paralysis. And it's a real thing. And I have some things to share about that if you guys are interested.
Well, I hope I'm not jumping the gun or still in your thunder, but I was going to say that I feel like the awareness of that and like de-spiritualizing it, de-demonizing it and realizing that, hey, this is what I have, this is a sleep condition, this is what's really going on, changed the experience for you?
Yeah.
Would you say that's
Yeah,
accurate?
because when I realized that it was not like demons, I had more peace during the moment where it was happening, where my heart's not going crazy. And I realized well, I later learned that the adrenaline from being scared during those episodes is responsible for the experience being worse.
Like creating hallucination type
Yeah,
of thing?
yeah. So when I learned to just sort of calm my way and just let the moment pass, it just felt really like I'm not aware about it, so I'm not thinking about it, and it's sort of kind of gone away a little bit. It's been a while.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah. So sleep paralysis, as I said, a lot of people have it, and they just don't know it. A lot of people think that they're actually having supernatural encounters or ghosts that are visiting their home, and why do people think that? Well, they think that because you're actually experiencing hallucinations that your brain is creating for you, and that makes things feel really real. The brain, how like you've got several stages of sleep, and sleep paralysis only occurs during your REM sleep cycle, which is why I found it interesting when Christine mentioned it last time, because that much I know. It happens during your REM sleep cycle, where your body is under a state of atonia, which means that most of your muscles are not working at all. So you're literally paralyzed during REM sleep. Like if you ever notice your pet when they're sleeping and their tongue sticking out, they're just
No.
like that. It's when you see that, or you a baby and you pick up their arm and it falls right back down during sleep. It's because they're at that very moment in REM sleep, where their body is completely uninhibited. Things like sounds, things like movement, pressure, pain, all that is sort of like, it's as if your brain has a bunch of switches of like your senses, and it turns them off during REM sleep so that there's minimal brain function during REM sleep in order for your brain to recuperate and to have rest. The only thing that's moving in your body that's working are the muscles involved in your breathing, but the rest of your body is completely paralyzed. So what happens during a sleep paralysis episode is that you are somewhat awake during that whole experience, and so then you become aware of being paralyzed because you can't move, and that panics the crap out of people. So you go into a panic episode because you can't move. Everything is dark because your eyes are literally closed and you cannot open them. And so it just snowballs into like this horrific experience that people conclude, or they think that it's like actual demons.
That's such a good point, adding to the conversation about being in our mind too, and the impact of fear and how it can produce you seeing things that aren't there. Like I first thing that comes to mind is like if you see a bug and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a bug. And then now every little thing you feel, you're like hypersensitive, like ah. So it's like now you're extra sensitive, your awareness is heightened, you're fear driven. So I think part of the religious experience and demons and all of that gets tied up into those feelings and fears.
Yeah, and it's so common. Like usually the time when you hear people talk about some experience like that, when did it happen? Oh, it happened in the middle of the night.
It's usually in the middle of the
night. And I like to ask always is, so what happened immediately after the episode? Oh, I went back to sleep. You're telling me that the devil himself was on your bed for a moment and after that moment was gone, you went right back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Like if you were awake and the devil showed up at your door, right? Would you end that with a nap, or would you go out and tell the world, or like turn on all the lights and wake up the entire family? Or not? I mean, I would not be able to go back to sleep. But why do you go back to sleep? Because it's happening between sleep cycles.
And I
It's
think
just
part
that
of
if
you
something
realizes
wakes you
like,
up-
okay, phew, it was a dream or that wasn't
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. So there's a lot to it, and I'm not saying that uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna brush all supernatural experiences with such broad brush, but I think that can
It's
explain
one possible explanation.
many episodes. Yeah.
Yes.
See, Lisette says the times that I've experienced sleep paralysis, the fear lingers after I wake up. I can see how people would think that there is a presence. Yeah.
And if you think about it too, like, I mean, I don't know the individual experiences. Maybe they can call in and share. But if I'm thinking about, like, for example, your sleep paralysis, like, what would be the purpose if it was a demon or a negative spirit binding you in your sleep for a moment and you wake up? Like, what was really the purpose of that? Not anything. Like, for the devil himself to come and do that, is that really doing anything? I don't see how we're attributing that to a demonic force.
Yeah. And what need would the devil have to catch you in the middle of your sleep?
Yeah.
Like, that's.
How about when you're on your way to go to church and then you're like, I can't move. That would be more
Yeah.
indicative of the devil's work. He's
Cool.
trying to keep you from God, right?
Be amazing if you could just like grab your hand while you're dropping your money in the little collector thing. Don't drop your
the
money.
devil has my hand. I
Yeah.
can't give.
That never happens. Yep. So I would encourage you, if you're like one of those that has thought that maybe ghosts show up at your bed at night, or you have encounters with devils or spirits at night that are haunting you, and you're like what I used to do. I'd wake up and start praying,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, we'd hold hands. We're cover like the blood of Jesus,
Cover you with
maybe.
the blood.
Um,
Or if you're Catholic, chanting the rosary or whatever.
the Ave Marias.
Uh-huh.
Don't do that, but maybe seek some help. There are sleep physicians, specialists that can diagnose and treat sleep paralysis, actually. There are things called sleep studies. I used to be a sleep tech for a couple of years, and they'll put you in a room and hook you up to a computer, and then they're going to observe everything happening at night. And what's really interesting is that those events are actually explainable and observed through what's known as a polysomnograph, which measures, among many other things, brain function. And then you can correlate and have actual evidence that what's happening to you, it's not something that is externally affecting you, like a spirit coming onto you, but rather something of the brain. That's common. It's harmless. Many people live with it, and it's no big deal.
And we can't underestimate the input that's going into our brain that's feeding those potential visions or dreams. So something that's coming to mind is, for example, if I had a friend that was pregnant and she's about to give birth at any moment, and then that night I have a dream she's going to have that she gave birth. And then now I'm correlating that, like, let's say the next day she gave birth. I'm thinking, God gave me that vision that she was going to have the baby, and boom, she had the baby. Well, in my brain, I knew she was due any moment,
Right.
Like, that's reasonable to also conclude that it could also be me knowing that produced that dream. I think that's more reasonable explanation than, God gave you a vision. And again, for what purpose? first you have to demonstrate God exists, then you have to demonstrate the mechanism that he would insert this dream into your brain.
And how it's not that you just had intuition about it and lucky guess, and coincidences are a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think a lot of people write coincidences as miracles or divine interventions. Very easy.
One phrase that I like that you say is, and I could be butchering it after now I'm quoting you, but something to the effect of that the improbable is likely, something to that effect. Can you expand on that? Because people also think like, what are the chances that this thing happened? That must be God, because all these good things happened at once. Or maybe you prayed for the rain to stop and then the rain stopped. Like, that's proof of God. What are the chances of this happening? In fact, I met somebody that was his reason for believing. And then if you ask him, well, how many times have you prayed in your whole life for the rain to stop? Well, it may have been several hundred times over the years, and this was the one time that it worked. So you have to take into account not only that one time that it was successful, but all the times that it's not, right? And even though, like, let's say it's really highly improbable to, let's say, be dealt a card of a royal flush, right? The chances of that is so slim, but it can still happen. Like, there's a probability that could happen. And if it happens to you, that was 100% occurrence. If the one time you played is the one time you got a royal flush, in your mind, that's 100% occurrence. So you have to not take in that one account, but big picture evaluate all of the occurrences or the attempts.
Yeah, for sure. In that, I think a person that has like done a lot of researching on that, which is, he wrote a book. His name is David J. Hand. If it interests you, he's got a book out there titled The Improbability Principle, Why Coincidences, Miracles, Rare Events Happen Every Day. So he actually argues that highly improbable events are improbable things are actually highly probable.
Improbable things are highly probable.
Exactly. Yeah. And, we see that without having to dig in too deep, but like things like winning the lottery. I mean, the chances of winning a lottery are like so out there.
Yeah. I heard you have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than winning the lottery.
That's right. And it's there's this thing called the gambler's fallacy, that people think fallaciously that, for example, the more lottery tickets that you buy, the more likely or the more probable that you would win the lottery.
And that's not the case?
But it's not the case.
How so?
Because every ticket has its own set of odds to deal with. They don't combine or accumulate and then become less. But every ticket that you buy has the same level of probability of winning than all of them together. And it sounds like it shouldn't be, but the thing is that it's the combination of numbers and that are possible in a lottery is so great that it's really highly unlikely that a person would win the lottery. Yet, because see, there are a lot more combinations than people actually, buying numbers. So,
and that
it happens.
That makes me think. I hear people quote, and I'm not going to get it right, but there's like the chances of all this around us just happen to come together is 1 to the 5 million power, right? I'm totally making up a number. But then I follow it up by saying, well, yeah, do you know how huge our universe is? Do you know how many billions of galaxies and planets and celestial objects there are? So, yeah, the highly improbable is probable.
Yeah, and we don't have to like go with like very difficult examples. Maybe just getting bird poop on your head.
The chances of getting pooped on by a bird.
It's like, if you think about it, like how many square inches of possible places that the poop could land.
No,
Yeah.
and even people being like, ah, and then it landing right in their mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, someone throwing something and hitting it like dead on.
Mm-hmm.
Things are likely to happen. And so we shouldn't write off unbelievable things happening to our lives and then therefore concluding that because they are highly unlikely that therefore a God was responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well said.
So, well, it's we are now stepping into the hour and 16 minutes. Let me look through the chat and see if there's anyone else that may be wanting to come up and give us a call. Let's see. All right. Well, it looks like we're going to be colorless this episode. But
Maybe next time.
I think that we've had some very interesting things to talk about. And certainly having you here, Apostate Ann, has been an ultimate pleasure. And
Pleasure's mine.
yeah, do you wish to say anything as we are closing up?
No, I'm honored to be here. I love these discussions. You can reach out to me on Apostate Ann on Facebook or TikTok. And thanks for watching. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And until next time, this has been. Oh, wait. I don't want to leave yet until we thank Lisette and
Yes.
Anton and Alma and Teo. I'm sure he's somewhere in there. Whom we have to thank for allowing this to happen, for making this possible for everybody. So you guys rock, and can't wait to do this
Thank
again
you.
next week. So until next time, this has been
Yes.
Belief Battles.
Hello and welcome to the all-new call-in show, Belief Battles, a weekly show ready to take your calls about religion, atheism, and secularism, featuring co-hosts, atheist and international VTuber Teo Elateo and Mark Peralta, an ex-evangelical pastor, now atheist. So without further ado, Belief Battles.
Call 1-866